Gratitude before God is not simply a polite expression of thanks, but a deep posture of the heart that acknowledges the one from whom all blessings flow. When we quiet our souls at the close of the day and reflect upon the hours that have passed, we begin to see the countless mercies of God that have surrounded us. Every breath we have taken, every step we have made, every moment we have lived is a gift from His hand. The sun that rose to awaken the earth, the air that filled our lungs, the strength that carried us through our tasks, the food that nourished our bodies, the water that refreshed us, all are reasons to bow in humility and whisper, "Thank you, Lord." Gratitude lifts our eyes from what we lack and fixes them on the abundance already given. It teaches us to recognize God's presence in both small details and great miracles. To lie down at night without acknowledging the goodness of God is to miss the chance to nurture a spirit of contentment. But when we enter into Thanksgiving, peace fills our hearts and the burdens of the day lose their weight. As we approach God in prayer, gratitude guards our souls from bitterness and despair. Even when the day was heavy with trials, when challenges pressed in, when disappointments wounded the heart, there remains reason to thank Him. Gratitude does not deny pain, but it declares that God is still faithful in the midst of it. To thank Him is to confess that He is greater than the troubles we faced. It is to affirm that His hand is guiding us even through shadows. Gratitude, before God transforms our perspective, shaping our minds to see that nothing is wasted in His plan. The smile of a child, the encouragement of a friend, the shelter we rest in, the provision that sustains us, the very gift of another day of life, all become testimonies that God has not forsaken us. When we choose gratitude, our hearts soften, and the presence of the Holy Spirit fills the room like a gentle flame warming peace. In His presence is not the absence of storms, but the assurance of God's nearness in the midst of them. When the heart is restless, when the mind is burdened with thoughts that will not quiet, when fears about tomorrow or regrets from yesterday press in on the soul, there is a place of refuge found only in the presence of the Lord. His presence is not far, it is not distant, it is not unreachable. It is as near as the whispered prayer from trembling lips, as close as the sigh of a weary heart that lifts itself toward heaven. In His presence, peace is not a fragile thing that comes and goes depending on circumstances. It is a peace that flows from His eternal nature, steady and unshakable. A peace that the world cannot give and the world cannot take away. As the night falls and silence covers the earth, those who draw near to God find that His presence wraps around them like a mantle, calming every anxious thought and quieting the noise of the day. To rest in His presence is to allow His Spirit to breathe stillness into the places of inner turmoil. It is to hear His gentle voice reminding us that He is our shepherd, that He neither sleeps nor slumbers, that His watchful eye is always upon His children. The worries that consumed us during the daylight hours lose their power when laid before Him. For He is the one who carries every burden and knows every need before it is spoken. His presence brings light into the darkest night, hope into the heaviest hour, strength into the weakest moment. There is no fear that can withstand the peace that flows from his throne, no despair that can overcome the comfort of his embrace. The soul learns to breathe again when it lingers in his presence, and the heart learns to trust again when it rests in the certainty of his care. Peace in his presence does not always change the circumstances around us, but it always changes the condition within us. It reorders our thoughts, turning them away from the weight of problems and fixing them upon the greatness of God. It reminds us that we are not alone, that the Creator of heaven and earth abides with us. In his presence, anger is stilled, confusion is cleared, and doubt is silenced. The spirit that trembles with worry finds its anchor, for his word assures us that he will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are stayed on him. As the body grows weary and sleep approaches, peace in his presence becomes the soft pillow for the soul, the gentle covering that shields us from fear, the holy stillness that invites us to surrender. Every heartbeat finds rhythm in his love. Every breath becomes an offering of trust. Every moment of quiet becomes sacred, for the Lord himself is near, and where he is, there is peace that passes all understanding. Deep rest in God is more than the closing of weary eyes or the stillness of the body at the end of a long day. It is the surrender of the soul into the hands of the one who never fails. True rest cannot be found in the distractions of the world or in the fleeting comforts that men often pursue. For even when the body lies down, the mind may still wander, and the heart may still carry heavy burdens. But when we turn to God in the quiet of the night, when we place all our cares before him and trust his perfect will, then the soul enters into a rest that the world cannot offer. It is not simply a pause from activity, but a release of every weight, a letting go of every fear, a yielding of every anxious thought into the presence of the Almighty. Deep rest in God is born from faith, faith that he who has carried us through the day will also watch over us through the night, faith that his hand will sustain us even when our own strength is gone. The one who abides in God's rest knows that nothing is hidden from his sight, that every need, every cry, every longing of the heart is already known to him. The soul can finally breathe deeply when it remembers that the Lord neither sleeps nor slumbers, that while we lie down and sleep, his watchful eyes remain upon us. Deep rest is not careless sleep. It is confident trust that God is in control, that he holds tomorrow, that he governs the night as much as the day. When the mind is tempted to dwell on uncertainties, when fears of what lies ahead creep into the stillness, the heart that leans on God finds assurance in his promises. His word becomes a lullaby to the spirit, reminding us that he gives rest to his beloved, that he quiets the storm, that he calms the troubled waters. In this rest, the soul finds renewal, the weary heart finds comfort, and the spirit finds strength for another day. Deep rest in God is also the healing of wounds that the day has inflicted. Harsh words, unkind actions, disappointments, and struggles often leave marks on the heart. But when we bring them to God in the secret place, his presence soothes them like oil poured on aching wounds. The night becomes a sanctuary where his spirit ministers to the inner being, restoring what was broken and renewing what was weakened. This rest is not shallow or temporary. It penetrates to the very depths of the soul and anchoring us in the reality that our lives are safe in his hands. It teaches us to release control, to stop striving, to allow him to be God, while we simply rest as his children. In that surrender, in that trust, in that quiet assurance, the soul finds the deepest rest it has ever known. For it rests not in circumstances, not in fleeting comforts, but in the eternal arms of the Almighty. Night prayer of trust is the pouring out of the heart before God with the assurance that he hears, that he cares, and that he will never forsake his children. As the shadows of evening stretch across the earth and the business of the day fades into silence, the soul is invited to place its confidence entirely in the hands of the Lord. Trusting God at night carries a unique depth, for in the stillness, we are reminded of our own weakness, of how fragile and dependent we truly are. Sleep requires surrender, for in those hours we release control. We let go of our strength. We become vulnerable. And yet we do so knowing that the one who neither sleeps nor slumbers keeps watch over us. This trust is not blind. It is grounded in his faithfulness. It is rooted in his promises. It is anchored in the testimony of countless moments where he has proven himself to be our refuge and our fortress, our shield, and our deliverer. To pray with trust is to confess with the lips and believe with the heart that our God is able, that his arm is mighty to save, that his wisdom is perfect, that his love is unshakable. As we lift our prayers of trust at night, we remember that every moment of the day was under his sovereign hand. The trials we endured, the blessings we received, the unseen dangers from which we were spared, all bear witness to his guiding presence. Trust means we do not need every answer. We do not need to see the whole picture. We do not need to control the outcome. We simply need to rest in the truth that our lives are hidden with Christ in God, and nothing can pluck us from his hand. The heart that prays in trust is not weighed down by fear of what tomorrow may bring. For tomorrow belongs to the Lord just as much as today. The soul that trusts does not tightly to worry, but releases every concern into the hands of the Almighty, believing that his plans are higher, his ways are greater, and his purposes will not fail. This night prayer of trust also becomes a shield against the enemy's lies, for the darkness often whispers doubts and fears, but trust in God silences those voices. The believer who surrenders the night to the Lord finds that fear loses its grip. That anxiety melts away in the light of his promises. That every restless thought is quieted by the assurance of his presence. Trust is not merely an emotion. It is a choice, a daily yielding of the heart to the God who has never failed. In prayer, trust becomes living, breathing faith that clings to his word, that leans upon his name, that rests in his embrace. As the body grows tired and the eyes grow heavy, the Spirit whispers one last confession of faith. Lord, into your hands I commit my life, my family, my tomorrow, my all. And with that trust, the soul enters into rest, knowing that the one who holds the universe also holds us close in the night. Night is a sacred surrender, is the moment when the believer lays down not only the weariness of the body, but the burdens of the soul at the feet of the Almighty. The day has been lived with its struggles, its distractions, its victories, and its failures. And as the sun sets, the heart is invited into a holy exchange to release all into the hands of God and to acknowledge that He alone has carried us through. The night is not merely a natural rhythm of rest, but a spiritual altar where the soul bows low and declares that nothing in the past hours was sustained by human strength, but by divine mercy. To surrender at night is to confess that our waking hours were upheld by His breath, that the unseen dangers were kept away by His hand, and that even when our thoughts wandered, His grace surrounded us. The sacredness of surrender at night lies in its posture of humility. As darkness settles, man is reminded of his limits. Eyes grow heavy, strength fades, and control slips away. Sleep is the greatest demonstration that we are not gods, for in those hours of stillness, we can do nothing to guard ourselves or to hold the world together. To enter the night with a surrendered spirit is to acknowledge that God never slumbers, that His watchful care does not cease when ours does. The believer who surrenders at night proclaims, "Lord, I release my life, my family, my possessions, my fears, and my dreams into your hands. For you alone are able to keep what I cannot." This surrender is not defeat but victory, for it transfers the weight of existence from fragile human shoulders onto the everlasting arms. It is an act of worship to say, "I will rest because you reign. I will sleep because you keep me. I will be still because you are Lord over heaven and earth." Night becomes a sacred moment of alignment where gratitude flows for the mercies of the day and trust flows for the uncertainties of tomorrow. It is the holy silence where the soul ceases its striving and learns the discipline of letting go. Night, as a sacred surrender, also prepares the heart for deeper communion. In the stillness of evening, the noise of the world fades, and the believer can hear more clearly the whisper of God's Spirit. The worries of the day are set aside, and in their place comes the peace that passes all understanding. The act of surrender transforms the bed into an altar and sleep into a testimony of faith, for it declares that we are content to rest under the shadow of the Almighty. This surrender is sacred because it does not treat the night as an end, but as a holy pause, a divine invitation to trust more fully in the God who has written our days and who holds the hours of darkness within His sovereign hand. Peace through divine authority is not the fragile calm that the world offers, for the peace of the world depends on circumstances, on stability, on the absence of conflict. But the peace of God, established through His sovereign rule, is a peace that cannot be shaken by storms, by wars, or by the uncertainties of life. It is a peace that flows from the throne of the Almighty, the one whose word spoke creation into existence, whose command stilled raging seas, and whose authority governs every breath of man. To know peace through divine authority is to recognize that rest is not rooted in the condition of the world, but in the power of the one who reigns over it. When Christ stood in the boat as the winds howled and the waves threatened to consume, his disciples were filled with terror. They feared for their lives, though the Son of God was with them. Yet with one command, "Peace, be still," the storm bowed to his voice and the waters became calm. This moment revealed the nature of divine authority. It does not negotiate with chaos, it subdues it. The disciples learned that true peace is not the absence of storms, but the presence of the Lord who has authority over them. In the same way, the believer's heart can rest even when the world trembles, because the same voice that stilled Galilee's water speaks peace over the soul that trusts in him. Peace through divine authority is not limited to outward storms, but penetrates the inner battles of the heart. Fear, anxiety, guilt, and unrest are forces that rage within the human soul, seeking to drown faith and rob hope. Yet the authority of Christ breaks their power. He is the one who gives peace not as the world gives, but as a gift secured by his victory over sin and death. His blood has reconciled us to God, removing the hostility between creator and creature. And now the believer can rest in the assurance that nothing can separate him from the love of God. The peace he gives is anchored in his authority as the risen Lord, the King of Kings, and the one to whom every knee shall bow. This divine peace reshapes the way the believer faces life's uncertainties. When nations rage, when economies collapse, when sickness strikes, when doors close, the heart that trusts in the authority of God is not destroyed. Peace flows because the believer knows that no event escapes the control of the Almighty. His authority governs history, sustains creation, and orders the steps of his children. To lie down at night and rest is to declare faith in this reality, that the God who rules heaven and earth also rules the hours of darkness. This peace is not fragile, for it does not come from the shifting sands of human power, but from the eternal rock who reigns forever.